Welcome back, Myrmidons, to another episode of Greek Mythology Retold podcast. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Tracy Wolff, a New York Times bestselling author of the Crave series, about her upcoming book, The Aftermyth. We talked about how Greek mythology is relevant to the 21st century reader and what she hopes middle schoolers are going to take away from her new book that she's releasing February 3rd. Here it is, The Aftermyth. Um, the Aftermyth is a story about students who go to a magical academy called Aximanders. And while they're there, they learn about Greek mythology by living through it and meeting their muse, literally personified for them. And they learn life lessons and discover their destiny. Her main character is Penelope Weaver, and you know Penelope is one of my favorite Greek mythology characters to explore. And we talked about how her Penelope is a reflection of the Penelope from the Odyssey. Welcome to the show, Tracy. I'm really excited to have you. I'm a little nervous and but the nervousness is excited because I love Greek mythology and I love that you're bringing Greek mythology to a younger generation. So, um, with that, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your book, Aftermyth.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And there is nothing to be nervous about, even if it's nervous excitement, but I know exactly what you mean because that happens to me a lot. Yes, the Aftermyth I am very excited about. It's my first middle grade. I've been writing books for my first published book came out in 2007, so I've been doing this a while, but I've always wanted to write middle grade. Partly because I was an English teacher and an English professor in a past life. And one of the things that I noticed, right, is that early on in reading, when kids are learning to read, they love reading. They think it's like story time is like the best time ever. But by the time I got them in high school and college, they would tell me constantly how much they hated reading and how miserable it was for them. And it always bothered me. And I was always like, what changes, right? How do we stop that? So it's really exciting that I have a publisher like Simon and Schuster for the Aftermath, who are as excited as I am about getting middle grade readers excited about, fantastical stories and everything else. So I'm really excited about that. But so the Aftermath is my first middle grade, and it is my shot at, I call it a herstory, right? Which is obviously not a word I've coined. It's been around forever. But one of the things that always bothered me, I love Greek mythology. I remember like my first memory of it is cuddling on the couch with my dad when I was very young, and he was watching the very, very old Clash of the Titans, right? And there was Andromeda and Medusa and Pegasus and the Kraken, and I just remember being fascinated by that story at the time, and then asking my dad like more about Greek mythology, and it was something that he really liked, so he told me a ton about it. And but one of the things I've always noticed is that so much of Greek mythology, kind of like history is written by the winners, right? So much of what we have for Greek mythology was written by men. And one of the things I've noticed is that they tend to vilify women a lot. Whether you talk about Medusa, whether you talk about Pandora, um, even Andromeda in some ways, Echo, all of the Arachne, like so many, the list goes on and on and on. And that bothered me. And so this is kind of my shot at trying to right some of those wrongs, right? Like the Pandora's box story, particularly, has always been one of those stories that kind of stuck in my craw. I actually wrote a very different YA many years ago, where Pandora opens an attachment instead of a box and harkens to technological Armageddon. But I kind of wanted to start the Aftermath series with it because, she was created by two male gods, Zeus and Hephaestus, and then given all of these gifts and this unending curiosity, and literally given the jar filled with all of the bad things, all of the evils of the world, and that she was created to punish Prometheus and partly his brother Epimetheus, right? Who are two titans, because Prometheus gave fire to humans, and she was going to be their punishment. And Prometheus was like, no, thank you. First of all, again, we're already treating women like chattel, right? Like, but he's like, no, you can keep her. And Prometheus is like, oh, no, 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 no. There's my puppies. Epimetheus is like, oh, no, no, no. She is beautiful. I want to keep her. And so he marries her, and then she opens the jar, and she's gone down in history as the bad person. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not cool. So I kind of do things a little differently in this book. And my main character, Penelope Weaver, I'm sorry, this is a really long answer. Um, my main character, Penelope Weaver, is a 13-year-old girl who is starting her first of 6 years at the Mystical Magical Anaximanders Academy. And she goes in thinking they're each of the students is sorted into one of five halls that is kind of the tenets of the Greek gods, and also kind of is patroned by one of the five Greek gods that they are named after. And she's convinced she's an Athena girl. Everybody in her family has always been an Athena. That's just who she is. She gets there, everything goes wrong, and she gets sorted into a different house, one that is pretty much the opposite of Athena. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is really, really bad. How do I fix this problem? But then things kind of get worse. And in the middle of all this, she kind of starts to realize that, hey, maybe all these myths she's heard are not quite right. Maybe there's something wrong with them. And it kind of starts to unfold that way. I don't want to give too much away, but
No,
lots
that's
of
a
crazy action.
yeah, right. It's just it's unfolding. So I like that the characters they become like a family, like the kids, when they're at the school. And I really it's reminiscent of Hogwarts in a way, but you've got a great spin on, that ensemble of kids that are friends. And I think that's really going to hit with middle grade kids. I have grandkids, and they are right at that sixth grade mark, right in the middle of my group. So I've got six. So
Oh my
anyway.
gosh, that's amazing. You don't look like you should have six grandkids. And
Oh,
I mean, you look very young. So wow, I am super impressed, and we can chat
yeah.
about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm an only child. And so there, I think when you talk to different readers or different writers, there are themes, right, that run through all writers' works. And found family is one of those themes that always has run through mine. I was born, my parents were older when I was born, and we moved around a lot. And so I was kind of always lonely, always searching. And it wasn't until I, went to college and, went away from home for the first time that I really kind of started gathering my own found family. And I think that's why it's so predominant. But wow, Hogwarts, that is a massive compliment. Thank you so much. I
Oh,
had so much fun with Anaximanders.
I feel like it's just gonna hit with that demographic because they're
Oh, I hope.
they're hungry for those kinds of connections, and you really make that in the book. So I was really happy to see that just coming
Well,
from that.
character is my favorite thing in the world to do. I love world building, but character is just when every author has something that comes easier to them than other stuff, and characters are one of those things, and character dynamics are one of those things that I love and that come very easy to me when I write, and that I think are so important. Like every author has a doorway into story, and character is very much mine. So thank you very much. I love
Yeah.
I love creating a core group of characters. I love creating really wacky side characters like Calliope and Frankie, and I just love doing fun stuff like that that kind of like enriches the world while we're dealing with Penelope and Fifi and Arjun and Kyrian and Sullivan.
And so let's talk about Penelope.
Oh, absolutely.
Penelope in the Greek myths. I love that you named her Penelope Weaver. That's fantastic. From somebody who comes from the Greek myth, it's like it rings all the bells for me. Every time I see a name, I'm like, oh, Paris, like, oh, Hector, like, oh my God, she's put them all in here. Um, I love that, in the Odyssey, we have a Penelope that's very sad
That's who
often,
she's
right?
named after.
Right. And so in the Odyssey, she's Penelope in her bed of sorrows, and she's, weaving, we connect her more than other characters in Greek myth with weaving. So anyway, what about uh, what about that character? How did you choose or decide on Penelope Weaver as your main character? And what were the connections that you made? And because I know
Well,
as a writer, you were very intentional about that. So I'm just wondering about your process of connecting.
well, I mean, I think it's something. Some of it will play out over the next five books, right? Because it's we're planning it to be a 6 book series at this point.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I'm super excited. One for each year
Wow.
is one for, each year. Or
Oh,
I think
I love
the
that.
first two are going to be the first year, but then we're gonna move on from there. But yeah, Penelope is Odysseus's wife, right? And she is honored in Greek mythology as being incredibly patient and as being this weaver, and who would waited for Odysseus through all of his journeys on the Odyssey, and who, when men came to court her, she would be weaving, and it would be this thing that, put them off. And she like, oh, when I finish this, and then she would never finish it, and all of these things. And when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about what Penelope's, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, I don't think it is, right? That Penelope, it turns out, is this very rare thing called a myth weaver, right? And we just begin to see the beginnings of that in book one, but as we continue on through the series, we're going to find out way more about what that means, right? So there's obviously that connection, but there's also the fact that, I don't know, like I said about how I feel about so many of the women in Greek mythology. They are either vilified for being strong or honored for being patient and waiting for their husband for, 30 years, or, much longer than that even. And I wanted to kind of start right at the very beginning by recasting that and by changing it. So here's this girl who weaves, this girl named Penelope. Um, but from the very beginning, things start going wrong for her because she does something at the very beginning of the book, and I cannot say what it is because you don't find out till the end how it works. But she does something at the very beginning of the book that alarms all of the gods and sends her on this whole very different path than kind of what she had thought was going to happen, and what maybe even they had thought was going to happen. And that's our first clue that this girl is way more than what we thought she was, or what she thought she was. And I think that I really wanted to kind of take that on this woman who is so honored in Greek mythology. I'm like, no, she is active, and she is powerful, and she is powerful enough to make people afraid, not in a bad way, but in a, oh my gosh, this girl could change everything kind of a way, And I think that, yeah, just wanted, I felt like it was time.
Yeah, that I like how you're presenting Penelope, because sometimes when I think about when we oftentimes, I'm sorry, I'm like stumbling around. My brain is like so many things happening at one time in my
Happens to me
head.
all the time.
So we have oftentimes Penelope is juxtaposed with Clytemnestra. But
Mhm.
and Clytemnestra is seen as like strong, but she's sort of vilified, and
Mhm.
Penelope, as you said, is more passive and waiting. But when you look at those two characters, they're both doing the same thing. They're both maintaining a kingdom for a decade. Penelope has to do it longer, but they're both they're both maintaining, and so they're powerful. And so I feel like we don't really like look at the foundation of that. And I like how you're giving your Penelope and giving that spin that she's bringing much more to the table than
Than people
what
gave
was
her
it
credit for.
and what people were expecting. So I
Right?
like
I mean,
that.
look at Medea, look at Jocasta, look at Antigone, right? So many of
Hmm.
these women, Antigone particularly, trying to make this very moral choice and do the right thing against all odds, and yet she is vilified for it. She's punished for it.
Hmm.
It is, and Jocasta, I mean, the whole Oedipus thing all the way around, right? But if you look at her, she's actually the strongest, most like forthright, most forward-thinking character in the entire book. Megara, you want to talk about? I mean, there's so many you can talk about of these women who are punished for being strong, or punished for being good at something, whether, you talk about Arachne and her weaving, or Medusa, for being too beautiful and too powerful as one of the Gorgon, I mean, it's difficult, right? And
Right.
I just, there's wonderful, so much wonder and so many amazing things in Greek mythology that we can get from it, from any mythology, really. You know, the power and the magic and the adventures and even some of the moral lessons, right? But I
Hmm.
think that bringing it into New Age, into this world, um, for this generation of girls, I think it's very important to help them stand in their own power and understand the the joy that comes with it, as opposed to just the difficulties and their rightful place, and their
Hmm.
rightful power.
And how, because from adult perspectives, we talk about Zeus interacting with all these female characters. And, from adult perspective, we understand that what he's doing is assault. How did you think about that? Because when you're dealing with middle grade, I teach in high school, so
Yeah.
even, and I can talk about it at a high school level, but even then I want to be too careful not to go too far, because it's a sensitive topic, but as adults we can think about it in a certain way. So how did you there was a there was a part in your book, and when you're talking about how many muses there were, and so you said they had been busy. What did you put it? They had been busy for several thousand years and had more kids. So I was like, oh, she just sort of. So how did you think about,
Love
and where
that.
did you make those kind of decisions, to
These are decisions that I think that I'm going to have to continue to make, particularly with some of the myths that I'm going to start tackling in the other books. Like the first book is Pandora's, and well, I don't want to spoil the end and how that all works,
I
but
know it's
what I
hard
you
not
know
like to talk about
I
stuff
know,
like,
like
wait, wait.
I have to be like I'm a little giddy about the end and how it all came together exactly. Like, sometimes when you're a writer, it doesn't quite come together as well as you hope it does. I really feel like in Aftermath, like everything just kind of like just worked exactly like the way I imagined it to be. So I'm very excited about it. But this is actually something that I'm pondering a lot, and it's something that my editor and I have had several conversations on as well, as we start delving into some of these other myths and the abuse that some of these women suffered. Absolutely. How do you deal with this in middle grade? That I don't know that I had the answer yet. Maybe we can talk about this next year after
Yeah.
I've written book two. I'm in the middle of writing it right now, and this is something I don't want to give away what the book is about, but this is definitely something that I'm wrestling with. But I think that if we continue, that what I want to do is I want to flip the script enough, right? That we look at what it is for this woman to be powerful, and what it is, why was she punished, for one, things outside of her control, and two, for being powerful, and maybe obviously gloss over. I'm not going to be discussing like how many rapes and how many things went on in Greek mythology, Again, something it's so interesting when you look at it having been written by men, how these things were like, perfectly okay for Poseidon, for Zeus. I'm like, not really okay, not, I feel like we're not getting the right lesson out of this. Um, but yeah, focusing instead on the power of these women and these characters, and focusing on how to flip that script, I think is the best way that I can do it, while acknowledging that bad things have happened to them, that they were treated unfairly, that they were treated badly. I think is, the best way that I can do it, so that we're not, getting bogged down. This is not something, yes, that 8 to 12-year-olds need to be thinking about, and we don't, I mean, also like the whole point, right, is to move beyond that. Like, this is not where we are anymore. Like, why do we even need to give it, um not why do we need to give it bandwidth? Obviously, it's as you get older, it's something that we obviously deal with. And I'm a literature professor. How many books have I, dissected with my students and talked about this? But like, I'm hoping to help create a a better, a kinder narrative for these girls, for what they can expect for their own lives and their future, and what they can, yeah, expect, right? What they can demand is the word.
Mhm.
We don't need to play this way anymore. This is not okay.
I think that that's really important because that kind of goes on one of the questions I was wanting to ask you was how myths like how can myths move into this next generation? Like what do you in writing this series, what do you want young people to take away from, the Greek myths? How do you envision your story of incorporating the myth to lead this next generation? You know what I mean?
I think that so many, I mean, people in general, but certainly, as people are coming of age, as kids are, becoming young adults and going through, you know, middle school and into high school, and kind of finding out who they are, and trying to, like, struggling between trying to fit in, trying to be who their parents expect them to be, who their teachers expect them to be, who their friends expect them to be, all while trying to figure out who they are. I think one of the best and coolest messages of Greek mythology is that right at that time where you feel the most mixed up and the most weak, and where bad things are happening, or confusing things are happening, usually that comes right before you get your power. And whether you want to look at superheroes and how that works for them, whether you want to look at mythology stories, whatever else, right? Romantasy, that period where your everything feels icky is the precursor to, like, right, the caterpillar to the butterfly, the precursor to all of this power that should come into when you come into yourself and stand in the truth that is yours. And I think that even as we look at these myths, we're going to be looking at the truths of who these people are, the men and the women, because the male characters have myths as well that they're going to be dealing with. Like, we have Paris, right?
Mhm.
And we're going to be looking at Theseus, which is, and Icarus, and, like, Theseus is another one. This whole the poor Minotaur, right? Born that way, vilified for being born that way and being different, locked up his whole life, and then he's the bad guy. Like, no, that's not right. That's not how we should treat people. And yeah, I think that's kind of the most that I want them to get out of this. And the other thing I really am hoping girls will find is I hope they see themselves. Well, if it's not in Penelope, maybe it's in Fifi. If it's not in Fifi, maybe it's in a girl I'm introducing in the second book, who I love very much, who I'm not going to give much away yet. Or
Ah,
maybe it's in Dr. Themis, right? But this is something I tackled in the Crave series as well, is I think that our society tells us that there's only one way for a woman to be strong. And then very
mhm.
often, like we've talked about, not to beat a dead horse, but we vilify her for then doing what has to be done. But I've been very lucky and have spent most of my life working in female dominated professions. And one of the things that I've seen, right, is that there are all kinds of ways for women to be strong. There's no one right way. There are women who are the fighters and the warriors who are out there. There are women who are the nurturers and the cheerleaders. My main character in Crave, Grace, her big power was she got up one more time than she got knocked down. That was it. No matter what happened, she got back up, you know? And for
Mm,
Penelope is this character who sees more than a lot of people see. You know what I mean? She looks beyond the surface. She asks questions. She delves more deeply into things. And there's a lot of strength and a lot of power in that, in this ability to see more than anybody wants you to see. And I hope that girls will see themselves and how fabulous they are. And boys as well. And whether it's Paris, who's a little lost right now, but Sullivan and Kyrian are two of my and Arjun are all really I just named them all. I love them all. Are really favorite characters of mine. And as we grow and they grow through the series, I'm really, really excited to be dealing with them as well and get to look at their growth arc and all of that. So I hope that they see that there's all kinds of ways to be powerful and you have to find your way and you have to be true to you and everything else will fall into place.
I like that.
So,
That's a lovely message. Or what if you, as the storyteller, that's a lovely message that you're weaving through your book.
thank
Like
you.
you're the weaver.
I'm the weaver.
You're the weaver.
I'm the story weaver. She's the myth weaver. It works.
Yeah. What how did you come up, like was there a moment that you were doing something, or when did the muse hit you for this story? You know, was there a moment or a time, or what made you think, where did the story come from? Another, you know what I mean?
Well, it was kind of the very rudimentary parts of it were kind of like a back and forth between my editor and I. Um, I've worked with Kara for I met her many years ago and we worked on a book together and it was such an incredible experience that and now and she was a YA editor at the time and now she's middle grade and I'm like I really we both really wanted to work on a project together and we were kind of talking about it and Greek mythology was something she was really excited about and as we started like thinking about it like it just I always say characters come to me first. Like I said, all writers kind of have a doorway in, the thing that speaks to them. And one of the stories I always tell is I have a best friend who's a brainstorming partner of mine, and she always comes to story through plot. I always come to story through character. And so when we're like first starting out on a book, this is how and it took us years, by the way, because we're like so self-aware. It took us years to figure this out. Like we would sit down to like brainstorm the very beginning. I'm like, okay, I want to write this story about this girl who she's like, but what is she doing? And I'd be like, but who is she? But what is she doing? But who is she? And we would do this back and forth until we finally figured out we're just coming at this very, very differently, you know? So for me, I start like an idea. I'm like, okay, I want to do a Greek gods boarding school. I want there to be halls that are kind of dedicated to the Greek gods. And I'm like, I don't really know what the plot is. I don't really know what the conflict is. I'm just kind of thinking around it. And then I start thinking, well, who goes there? Who's going to be my main character? And from there, somewhere in there, I get a lot of different ideas. I have books full of ideas that I have not had time to write. But I always know that an idea is going to stick if somewhere in this process a voice starts talking to me in the back of my head, you know. And Penelope showed up, and I was like, oh, I know who you are. Oh, you're very interesting. And she was not who I expected, because one of the things I laugh about is Penelope is very much my best friend. She was my college roommate, and she and I are very opposite in a lot of ways. Like I think most people are always shocked that our friendship has lasted 30 years, you know. But we met each other and we were very like, whatever, very kind of like, huh, I don't understand you. Her more of I don't understand you than me. But I'm very Fifi, who is Penelope's roommate in the book. And so I thought Penelope was going to show up as Fifi, and she showed up instead as my dear friend Jen, and it was really fun actually. Once I didn't even recognize that at first. I'm just like, oh, who is this person? And once she started talking, I'm like, oh, you're interesting, and I started writing her. And then I wrote her first scene with Fifi, and then I wrote the room scenes when they get back to the hall. And I'm like, I'm somewhere in there. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. I am actually writing the dynamic of me meeting my best friend, but from her point of view. And that made writing the rest of the book so much fun. And it was so validating when in fact, the book is dedicated to her. You'll see it if you look at the front that it's dedicated to Jen. And when I gave it to her to read for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, what if I totally am wrong? What if I totally mess this up? She called me about like halfway through. She's like, Oh my gosh. She's like, I am so Penelope. Like, I didn't tell her, right? She's like, I'm Penelope, right? Like, she's like, I'm like, girl, I got you. Like, this really, like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, oh my God, how did you walk into that amphitheater after all? And I'm like, oh yay, I did it. I got it. So it was really, really validating. So I think writers tend to put themselves in their characters, and I do that. But every once in a while, somebody I love creeps in, right? My partner says, my hero in the Crave series stole all of her best lines. So, so I don't know. Maybe he did.
Well,
But yeah,
that's
that's kind
don't
of how
they?
some of the story. I
Yeah, they
came.
say that about
Who's.
writers.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. They say that about us. We're
yeah,
terrible. We're terrible eavesdroppers too in public. We're just sitting around like watching people. Like I said, character is one of those things I love. So I'm always watching like how people drink their coffee, how they do this, how they're like walking down the street. Like, how would I describe that walk? How would I describe that? You know? And so yeah. But I kind of came to the story through her. And then once I figured out who this Penelope girl is, I'm like, how can I, because I'm a terrible person, how can I torture her as much as absolutely possible? Right? Like Fifi would roll with the punches. Penelope's like, oh my God, my shoes are muddy and it's the end of the world, let alone everything else that comes after that. Right? That's just the tiny, tiny tip of the iceberg. So yeah, that's kind of how the story evolved for me.
I love it. Let me look at my questions here. Oh, I wanted to ask you about, so in Greek mythology, we have the idea of fate or destiny, and no matter who the character is, they can they can never outdo it. And the more they try to run from it, they just run right into it, right? what what is your take, as a literature professor, and all the things that you've read, the books that you've written, how do you see myth and destiny? Do you think that that's relevant in our modern life? Are we are we predestined to do the
This
things
is
that
so
we're
interesting because
predestined to do,
without
or
realizing
can
it, you've hit on what's going to be a massive theme in the series, and only a few little tiny seeds were laid in book one, but I'm going to really start dealing with it in book two, moving all the way through book six. This whole idea of, can we outrun our destiny, or are we always going to be who we were meant to be, and that is a huge question in the Greek gods, right? Like the fates, the three with the eye, like the one who spins it, the one who cuts it, all of these things. There are some things obviously about ourselves we can't change, but I also feel like you can do, and I think the message that I want kids to take away from this, right, or middle grade readers is, or any of my readers, whatever age, is you can be whoever you want to be, and you are more than you think you are. I think most of us tend to think ourselves small. Oh, I can't do that. Like, or, oh, that's not for me, or, whatever. Or even if it's like a goal, like I'll just work towards that goal. But like the idea of like this massive, massive goal, or like being powerful, or like having magic, or whatever it is, like that, that's not for me, right? Whether you look at, whoever you look at, whether you look at Katniss or Harry Potter, or, any of these characters you go through, um, part of it is they are more than their destiny is. And I think that's a really important message to for readers. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely something I'll be dealing with.
I like that. That's good.
Starting in book
That's
two.
it's a huge contemplation.
It
So
is.
when
Oh, it
I'm
is, right? You talk about,
because
or
we
like you look at Orpheus going down to get his wife, back from the underworld, and you look at Perseus, you look at Theseus, you look at Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, right? It is such an interesting thing how Greek mythology, in some ways, focuses so patriarchal. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so like you have to stay, and it's very classist, right? You have to stay in your place. If you fly too close to the sun, you're going to crash and burn. and I think that that has always been used for people in so that people in power can stay in power, and
Hmm.
people who don't have power are content to be that way.
Right.
And I think
You're conditioned to accept
you're conditioned to
your
accept it.
the level at
Exactly.
which the ceiling at which whatever your
You
level
aspire to.
is, that's it. Like, and then to be satisfied in your little space of the 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 culture or the society.
Exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things, right, is that when they asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, how many women should sit on the Supreme Court, and she said nine, and everybody was so horrified. Nobody ever questioned the nine men should sit on the Supreme Court. It never, for 200 years, nobody ever even thought about that. That was just how it was, right?
Right.
And I think that we're just like, you know, as a gender, as a socioeconomic level, as all of these different things, we are conditioned um to be a certain way. So that, I mean, I think this is something we see play out, we're seeing play out right now, where the people who have power and the people who have money want
Mhm.
more money and want more power. I mean, this is an age-old tale. It's not brand new.
Right. I was just having a similar conversation. I have a friend that we've been friends. I'm going to tell, it's going to be like how old I am, but let me see, 7. We've been friends for over 50 years. We were little peanuts together in like first, second grade. And so we were talking about how, like my grandmother, when she was born, and my nonna, I'm Italian, so my nonna helped raise me, but when she was born, women didn't even have the right to vote. And so I'm standing here. My my grandmother did not have the right to vote when she was born. And so when she was 10 or 11, 1920, women got the right to vote in our country. So historically, it's not even that long, and my mother tells the story that in the 70s, she had to have my grandfather co-sign for her to get I don't remember if it was J.C. Penney or Sears store credit card
Right.
because she couldn't do that as a woman. So that's my mother. So historically, it's not a lot of time that women have been given the equal rights. And I think we are at a point now in 2026 that you can rent or buy property, you can vote, you can go to school wherever you want, you know, this is the first time. And so, as you bring these myths and these stories for this young generation, these young ladies are going to experience a world very much different from their like great grandmothers or
Well, we
great
hope so. We
grandmothers,
hope so.
right? Yeah.
Right?
But they
As we're dealing with so many women's issues in America today.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but I know exactly what you're meaning. I'd never thought of it that way, but yeah, I realized my grandmothers were born 10 years apart, and yet they were both born before women had the right to vote. And I always talk about my mom because my mother, my mother's mother went to college at a time when when women didn't do that. And my mother, went to college, and after college, she actually didn't get married till she was just about 30, which in that day, my grandfather had given up. He thought, well, this is it. She's the old maid. We're just gonna have, I mean, that's the term they use. Like, oh, I
I
was just an
know.
old maid.
Yeah, you're an old maid
But
or a spinster. Yeah.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But what she was a woman who wasn't going to settle. And when she graduated from college, she took off and she saw the world. She was a teacher, and she applied to teach for the government. And she went to teach in Okinawa. She went to teach in Bermuda. She traveled all of Europe on her own at a time when, yeah, she couldn't have a bank account without her father's name on it. And she couldn't have a credit card without, her father's name on it. And all of these things. But she was like, I'm not doing this. Like, she'd work all year, and then she'd travel all summer, and she saw the world at a time by herself. Like, I mean, it's not like, oh, she went with her. You know, she just took off and went. And she was like such an incredible role model, and so such a massive force in my life. Like, um, not to be morbid, when I was doing her eulogy, a couple years ago, when I was writing it, um, I quoted Sandra Cisneros' House on Mango Street about her being a wild horse of a woman, and how, she wasn't easy, but women who break barriers really are, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that, yeah, like that's the kind of energy, right? Why do we need to ask permission? Did my dad when he took off, did he ask permission? No. Nobody thought it was strange that he did it. Why is it so strange that she wanted to?
Mhm.
But yeah, this whole idea of like finally this idea that this generation of girls, please, like we're born expecting to be doctors, expecting to be president, expecting to be whatever it is they wanted to be, expecting to
Mhm.
be, a stay-at-home mom if that's what they wanted to be, but having choices that so many generations didn't have. And you're right. When you look at it, we're only a little over 100 years out,
Yes,
right?
and things take a long time culturally, because it's like steering the Titanic. And
Mhm.
it just, when I'm talking to my high school students, I say, I'm standing here in front of you and my grandmother. I said, how many of you guys have grandmothers? They got grandmothers. I said, well, I'm standing in front of you and my grandmother, who was the same distance from me, that you guys are to your grandmother, didn't have all these rights. It was different. And I said, you're so like, I'm like, I'm older than their parents. Like my oldest grandkid's 16. So it's kind of like, I try to keep it real, but it's like your great grandmothers and your grandmothers, I'm here. Like, and when we talk about civil rights, like I was, I don't remember it because I was born in 65, but it was, I was born into this happening. So I'm literally here in front of you. It's not that long ago. And so when we look at how when our society seems so topsy-turvy and a little bit turbulent, it is because it wasn't that long ago. We're still working it out through the cultural consciousness, and I'm hoping
I
that
mean, cultural lag is a thing, right?
yeah.
It's a thing. I mean, when they talk about it in science, where how long it takes a, a society to catch up to science, but it's a thing all the way across the board. How long
Mhm.
it takes you to catch up to new things, and living in the society that we're living in right now,
Yeah.
you know, where technology is moving so incredibly quickly, and trying to, I have a child in college, right? And one of the things we're talking about, and everybody's talking about, is this small group of kids who are like from a couple years ago to are really disadvantaged going into the workplace because college's cultural lag there hasn't caught up with how do you deal with AI in the workplace? How do you prepare students to enter a workplace where AI is taking so many of the entry level jobs? Right.
Mhm.
So this whole big technological cultural lag, as we as a society try to figure out how to maneuver, how to graduate these kids, and how to give them, a job that they can do and that they can learn in and that they can fulfill, and be fulfilled by, at a time when so many of those jobs that they would normally go into aren't going to exist in a couple of years, or are already dying now.
Mhm. There I
Cultural lag is a thing.
yes, and I tell my students too that there's whatever they're being prepared for. I said, I don't expect you to be history. I'm a history teacher and English. I do both. But it's like, I don't expect you
Me
to,
too. I was in history and English.
I don't know
I love
how
that.
I can't unweave those together. They're, when I'm teaching English, the history is a
Oh,
big
you
part
have
of
to
that.
be able to ground it. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
was an American lit. I mean, I did a bunch of I taught Shakespeare a lot too because I taught seniors. Um, but freshmen and seniors and then juniors finally, and then in college I kind of did it all. But yeah, it's impossible to unweave any kind of literature, art, music. When you look at it, you have to look at the history that formed it, right? Like if you're going to look at the Harlem Renaissance, you need to understand what was happening in Harlem and in America in the 1920s. If you're going to look at Victorian literature, you have to understand what was happening. If you're going to look at literature that came out, um, one of the things I studied and did my thesis on was that over the turn of the century into the 20th century, most major American writers had a character that committed suicide, which is very unusual. And what is it that was? It was the massive cultural lag and cultural shift from a rural society to an urban society, and all of the technology and everything, and all of these people who could not find, like we said, right? These people who are searching to find their place. All these young kids, and like that comes right before they come into their power. But all these people who are feeling powerless and are feeling left behind and are feeling whatever, it was a massive cultural moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, history. I love that.
I know, right? Is there anything else that you would like to have readers think about, or have my audience of Greek mythology consider or think about as we?
Um, Well, we've talked about it, and I love this. We've talked about so many of the themes and the serious stuff behind it, but I also want to say, like, I think it's a really good time. It's a lot of fun. Like the campus moves like a Rubik's cube, which oh my gosh, one of the things I had to do to keep everything straight is I had to buy, a Rubik's cube, and I had to label where it was, and I had to move it. Like, okay, if I want to move this over here, what does that look like, right?
Yeah.
So the campus moves like a Rubik's cube. There are wild muses. There are upside down waterfalls. There are so many snakes. There are all kinds of like really fun. I'm super excited to delve more. You get to see the underworld a very little bit in this book, but I'm excited, and I think it's going to be book three, to really delve more into the underworld, and because I'm really excited by how it runs, and what that looks like. And it's just, I think it's a really good time. I had a really great time writing it. I hope people have a
I
really good time reading it.
It is a very fun book, and you just said something right now that I don't even know why I didn't connect it with the waterfall that's like the upside down. She's like, I gotta jump, but I'm gonna go up, and I'm like, oh my God. Um, y- you may I hate to talk about Red Rising, but but I love Red Rising. You're like at the begin
I haven't read
for
it. My
the
partner's reading it right now.
I I
She told me I have
love
to read it.
I think you will like it because it's like the grown-up version of um Pierce Brown brings in a lot of like Greek mythology and Roman history. And so, I just made this connection between
Oh,
you're
cool.
you're giving a mythological, because it's not a retelling, it is a you're giving modern ancient myth a modern platform in a current world. And so
Thank you. That's a really
Pier-
lovely way to say it. Thank you.
and Pierce Brown is like, it's science fiction, but he's also touches so heavily on Greek mythology. And so I just, whatever you had just said right now made me think about, you're giving that same thing to the
I'm
young
definitely gonna have
kids,
to read it. I
and
know.
and and I guess that thread for me, I'm thinking about, this is why the myths are so powerful. They can be woven through so many different kinds of stories and maintain their relevance. And for those of
I
us
mean,
who
they
read,
are, right? And like whether and this is the thing, right? The creation myths of Greek mythology, right? If you look at the creation myths of Roman mythology, if you look at them of so many different my children are half Egyptian, and if you look at, like, we spend a lot of time on like Egyptian myths in my house and learning, Egyptian history and all the things that go with that. Um yeah, like there are so many things that are different and so many things that are the same, you know?
Mhm.
And it's because the experience of being human. is the
Oh,
same. You know, there are things, obviously, we all experience different things. We all live different lives. Things are, based culturally, they are, based on all these different reasons, all these different ways. But the experience of being a human, of loving, of being afraid, of wanting something more, of yearning, of feeling powerless, of wanting to be powerful, of wanting to help other people. All these are universal human things, and
yeah.
mythology taps into all of it.
Right. That is the big question. What does it mean to be human? And as a writer, you are definitely exploring that in this book. So this is the one. I'm just gonna
What does
make
it
sure
what
I
does it say, right? That we explore being human through looking at the gods, the Greek gods, right? It's
right,
a very
right.
interesting thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess it is about an hour, about time to wrap it up. I have just enjoyed listening to you and talking with you, and I hope that we get to do this another time. And you've got 5 more books coming out, so I'm ready for
Well, I
that.
definitely hope we get to do this. I really
Yes.
enjoyed speaking with you as well. I love speaking to another history English teacher. That's amazing. What grade do you teach? Do you
I
teach juniors or
I seniors. So right
you teach
now I
seniors?
seniors. Right now I'm teaching it's called History in Film. So we start with the ancient world and we show films, and then I teach them. I take a humanities aspect, so I teach them about a time period of literature, architecture, um,
How
art,
badass.
right? And then we look, and I teach them mise en scène, so how to evaluate films. And then we look at a film and we talk about like this the quality of the film and how the director is interpreting historical events and what are some things that, like, so we look at it like that, and it gives them this lens to see history in a different way. And because it's seniors, I get to do films like Braveheart, and I'm looking at that's kind of one that's the first big one that they have that most of them haven't seen, and they're just like, what? And and sure, there's a lot of historical
Oh, I love
inaccuracies,
that. I love how you
but
do that. Because that's one of the things I always did too, is I would always like when I teach American Lit, I divide it into like the 7 periods, right? And we look at them and we explore the history of it, we explore the nonfiction writings of it, we explore the fiction writings of it. And like we kind of do the whole thing. And I do that as well when I'm teaching like early American or early European Lit. But yeah, like one of the things I love to do when I'm teaching like A Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad is we always watch this is in a college setting, we always watch
right.
Apocalypse Now,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And then we also
yeah.
watched the documentary about Belgium and the Congo, right? What is it? The red rubber. I can't think of the name of it now. But yeah, like we kind of look at all of that. Or Macbeth, like you look at like Patrick Stewart's version, which is very, dystopian. And then you like it's so fun to kind of do that and look at how different time periods like look at the same material and how it all kinds of comes about.
Hmm.
It's really, really interesting. I
Yeah,
love
and
that. I love that we teach the same way.
I love it. And when I do freshmen, the biggest second semester is always my favorite because that's the Odyssey part, and I
Yeah,
kind
the
of get
Odyssey and Romeo and Juliet.
I I get really bogged down in the Odyssey because I have a hard time getting out of it because I take them way deep.
It's so
Because
fun.
I
It's
know,
so fun to teach them
I
to
know,
teach that to them. I love it. Yeah, the
right?
Odyssey is one of my favorite things to
But
teach.
that's pretty much my grade level. So it's either freshmen or seniors. And
Yeah. I did freshmen and seniors for a long time, and then finally, because American Lit's my first love, they finally gave me the junior honors my last
mhm.
couple of years when I was teaching high school before I moved into college. But
Oh,
yeah, I love that. That's amazing. I love that we have so much in
yeah.
common. Thank
Oh,
you so much for having me. I
well,
really had a lovely time.
I'm glad to have you, and I look forward to the next time then.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you.
All
And I
right.
hope you have a wonderful 2026 with your
You
six
too.
grandkids. That's amazing.
Well, I intend to, but thank you, and you too. You as well.
Take care.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.